A thought that seemed to echo across the board was that blended finance is needed to catalyze the sector towards a more sustainable future. For the next session, would request everyone in the audience to please remain here. We will continue here itself in Audi 1. Over to you, Aman.
Thank you, Shreya, for handing over. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to the last session of this conclave. It is an honor for me to announce this special panel, which happens to be a first all-woman panel at any IIC Summit. The panel journey from idea to scale will be a virtual fireside chat with different entrepreneurs who are using innovative technologies to battle climate change. This panel will be moderated by Jayashree Patoti, who is the co-founder and partner at Enzia Ventures. Enzia Ventures is an early-stage VC fund focused on environment, healthcare, and education. Moving on, we have Abhilasha Purwar, who's the founder and CEO of Blue Sky Analytics. Blue Sky Analytics is an enterprise which leverages environmental data sets to solve modern-day climate issues. We also have on our panel Dr. Edlil Subayan, who is the co-founder and CEO of String Bio. String Bio enables next-generation ingredients that promote sustainability and traceability for evolving value chains. Finally, we have Soumya Balendran, who is the co-founder and director at C6 Energy. C6 Energy is a biofuel company that uses seaweed as a fuel source to reduce the consumption of non-renewable sources of energy. Now for the session, I hand over the stage to our panelist and moderator. Over to you, Jayashree.
Thank you, Aman, and thank you, IIC India Impact Investors Council for putting such a terrific panel together and for giving me the opportunity to moderate and draw insights in this session. And like one of the IIC members said, I think the agenda is more to draw out the human side of these terrific journeys that all three panelists here have had. So without further ado, let's jump into it. And maybe we can just start with your brief introductions and what's your vision for the company. So maybe I can start with Abhilasha, you, and then Ezil, and then Soumya. Abhilasha, you on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, guys. I'm always like role number one because of my name, which starts with A. My name is Abhilasha. I run a company called Blue Sky Analytics. We are a climate tech company which focuses on extracting environmental and climate data from satellite data. So we deal with like a lot of data, about 30 terabytes plus, a lot of AI, and we sort of clean, convert, transform all this big models. We put like atmospheric chemistry models, water chemistry models, climate models on satellite data, and then give clean data APIs. So in 2019, we started with the air quality because of the air pollution crisis in North India, and converted, before Blue Sky entered the market, we had about 250 data points of air quality for entire country, for entire India. And now we provide 3.3 million data points with a 1 kilometer square resolution. So you can see the efficiency gain that you can really get by just like dual combo of ground sensors and satellite data, and then putting a lot of, data analysis and AI on top of it. So yeah, I'm an engineer by training. I went to IIT, graduated in 2012. Worked with Ministry of Environment when Jairam Ramesh was heading it, and worked on a bunch of projects with Central Pollution Control Board, a lot of industries, coal power plants, textile. Went to Yale to do environmental policy as like my education. Was in the US for a bit, invested about $150 million in capital, and then decided to move back to India. Sorry if I was a little...
No, that was great. Measure what matters. So if climate matters, then start measuring. Over to you, Ezil, for your brief.
Hi, everyone. Great to be on this very interesting panel. So myself, I come from the biotech sector, right? And fundamentally, what we're doing at String is making sustainability market relevant. And what we mean by that is to date, sustainability has been an afterthought in terms of how we manufacture We manufacture in a certain way and then we think about sustainability. But fundamentally, what we are driving forward at String is to bring to market product choices for consumers that are fundamentally very clearly performance differentiated. But when a consumer makes a choice based on performance, they're inherently making more sustainable choices because of how these products are manufactured. So how are we doing this? So we've got a biology-based platform wherein we leverage the energy that is there in methane, a greenhouse gas, I'm sure very familiar for the audience here. And using biological advances, we're converting the energy in methane into a wide array of next generation ingredients. So these are ingredients that go all the way from, protein for animal nutrition sector to protein for human nutrition consumption to agri inputs to inputs for cosmetics. And, we're continuing to grow in terms of the wide array of products that we can make using greenhouse gases. And as we develop and mature, we're also starting to expand our technology platform to see what are the other interesting raw materials which we can leverage such that we can bring to market products that are, as I said, clearly performance differentiated, but fundamentally more sustainably manufactured. So that's been the driver for String, and that continues to be the driver for us. In terms of my background, very much a technology geek. Finished my undergrad in India in biotech, moved to the US, finished my PhD in a very interesting area of protein design, and post that got into the startup world. And I've been kind of doing a rinse and repeat of develop technology scale with a couple of different companies before starting up String. Excited to talk here about interesting high points, low points in the journey, as well as what's ahead for the ecosystem in India today.
Very interesting journey from PhD to starting this in India almost 10 years back, is it?
So we are a seven-year-old startup right now. Yeah.
7 years. Soumya, over to you.
Hi, good evening to everyone. I'm very happy to be a part of this panel discussing a very relevant topic today. To give a background about myself, so I am the co-founder of C6 Energy, and pretty much a very strong undergrad background in biotechnology. Then I did my master's in management from IIM Calcutta, but started up right after the undergraduation in 2010, looking at problems which are very large scale. So the vision of C6, if I may say, is disruptive solutions for sustainable planet. So that's basically what we look at. We have identified 3 critical areas which we focus on. One is the food security angle. The second one is animal health. And the third one is renewable polymers and fuels. So as many of us in the panel and also in the audience might know, whether it's our food, feed, or fossil fuels or plastics, all of them actually originate from biomass. So it's ultimately the plant biomass which gets converted into a variety of products which are very, very impactful in multiple facets of our life today. So we at C6 are cultivating these seed-based biomass. Obviously, for a country like India, trying to cultivate biomass based on land takes away a lot of important area required for food production. So we've moved the whole biomass production into oceans and then convert them into products for agriculture to increase the productivity of land-based crops. We have products in animal health, which helps in increasing the immunity of animals from poultry to cattle to shrimp, thereby reducing the antibiotics and the non-tolerant effects of chemicals thereby. And we're also having a focus on renewable polymers and fuels, which can be created using the sea plants at a large scale. We've commercialized our agri products in India and in about 6 different countries worldwide. We've just launched our animal health line of products. Polymers and fuels is still at an R&D phase, which we hope to launch in the next few years. So that's a brief about C6 Energy.
Very happy to be part of this and happy to hear the other thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you for those overviews and the game-changing plays each of you is working on. Moving on to the next question, really trying to understand what is the motivation, what is the purpose with which you started what you started. So Abhilasha, over to role number one.
I have a very sort of pessimistic view of the planet at the moment. I am coming from a lot of diving in the Caribbean Sea, and almost 90% of the reefs that I witnessed with my own eyes were dead and bleached. So, and like I obviously, because I'm in the data segment of things, so I look at the numbers much more closely. We have a product around forest fires at Blue Sky, which we sell to utilities and investment firms across the globe. And you know with the news how much forest fires we've had, how much carbon emissions are coming from, and it's a very vicious circle. More that we have forest fires, more emissions, more warming, hence more forest fires, hence more warming. So how do we get out of that vicious circle? So my motivation is to be alive 15, 20 years from now, to grow up as an old lady with like, cats and dogs. So yeah, like, I just want to die at the age my grandparents died, which is like, they're 90 and they're alive. So, and I don't think that's going to be a large possibility for the planet. Honestly, if you look at numbers, you look at models, the probability that we might succumb to one of the extreme weather events, hence our mortality rate is going to be significantly higher, is very high. And a lot of these numbers and models haven't come to the general conscious yet. With Blue Sky, we want to make those numbers easy to access for all the models, whether it's a risk model, it's an investment model, it's news across the planet. So we can all, be climate tech entrepreneurs, climate tech employees, and do something about it.
Super. So the message is, if you want to be alive, jump into doing something in climate tech or invest like we do. Ezel, over to you.
Very interesting. Yeah. So I think we totally need to jump in sooner than later. Interesting, Abhilasha. So my journey itself actually came completely from the other end. I would say a more glass half full kind of view. I had spent, more than 10 years looking at sustainable products, but largely coming from corn-based feedstocks. And fundamentally, how I entered this space is to say that if you could leverage biological advances, you have a lot more interesting chemistries that are allowed than what chemical-based manufacturing has provided for us, right? If you go back, 50 years, largely manufacturing for paints, for consumer products, for clothing, for dyes, was all using chemical catalysis, and a huge cost to the environment from this kind of manufacturing. But fundamentally, as we understand microbes, as we understand DNA sequencing, synthesis, read, write better, we can actually use more greener processes to make the same molecules. And we can also use greener processes to make interesting molecules with better performance. So having, that was my fundamental reason to jump into this field, was to really see how to leverage biological advances to bring better products to market. Initially, we started looking at the core tools to engineer biology better. But then we realized, where if you're just doing a tool, you don't really have, you can't really drive the value chain completely. And that's when we started looking at the kind of products. And when we started looking at the kind of products, methane was a very, very interesting molecule to look at. Because fundamentally, the only thing we know what to do with methane is to burn methane and leverage the energy from it, right? But that need not be the case for us moving forward, because it's a very stable alkane, it's a high energy alkane. And if you can combine that with the advances we've had in biology, you can now suddenly convert the energy in methane into an interesting array of molecules. So that's the driver. And, so I come more from the technology side. But now having, developed these products, working with the consumers, working with farmers, working with feed manufacturers, the performance aspects of what we can actually bring to market is very, very interesting. And lo and behold, these products that we're today bringing are, carbon negative, carbon neutral products, which then actually goes back to where I started my journey, which was ultimately saying, let's leverage the power of technology to drive innovation that can fundamentally change how we live and breathe and, move. So, so my purpose comes more from the core technology aspect. Very exciting to see where we are today. And one thing I want to add is, I think just in the last 5 years, I would say the conversation around climate impact and climate change has warmed up significantly, right? Because I think just 7 years back, trying to explain what we were doing was not as easy as what the market is opened up to listen to today. So that's also been a significant change. And, going back to what Abhilasha said, anything you do with innovation, anything you do with technology is fundamentally very challenging, right? You have to break a lot of barriers to bring new changes, new habit changes to market. If you can do things that are worthwhile, right? The oftentimes the thing that I go back to is do something where it's worth failing at, right? Because even if you fail at this, it's enough that you've made enough of an impact to move forward. So that's the other driver also in terms of what we're doing at String, what personally drives me as well.
Great. Soumya, over to you. What has been your purpose, motivation? And then we'll move on to the next question as well.
Sure. I think one thing which I certainly heard what LL said, which I completely agree with, is the conversation about climate change is so much more now compared to what it used to be earlier. So if I recall when we started off in 2010, when we go out and try explaining it to people about, we're doing seaweeds cultivation at a large scale and converting it into a range of products. The only answer you would hear is like, what are these guys doing? What is this whole seaweed? Today, seaweed is such a well-known topic, such a hot topic to a certain extent in this whole climate change platform. So that just reminded me of that piece where, I'm very glad that today there's a lot more conversation in this field. But coming back specifically to your question, Jayashree, why we started this is we were a bunch of students right out of college. And we had these lofty aspirations saying that, okay, we're based out of, we're coming out of these colleges and we probably have the skill sets and the kind of ecosystem around us, which could help us in solving big problems. And we wanted to pick one. And back then, microalgae fuels was a really big topic. I mean, it was billions of dollars were being poured into it. So 1 year before graduation, all of us spent about most of our time, apart from doing our theses, we were trying to find out, can we actually make microalgae into fuels a viable proposition? And with a mix of biotechnology and engineering backgrounds for all of us, in about 8 to 10 months, we figured that the scalability of this is going to be an issue, particularly like a country like India, where we're already land crunched, fertilizer crunched, and water crunched. And saying that taking any of these feedstocks, converting them into large scales in land and making them into any renewable products seemed like an impossible answer in all ways possible. So then we all pretty much said, okay, this is not something which is really going to be scalable. And there's really no point of making, a 10 liters or 20 liters kind of a small scale solution. But that's when we suddenly came across this whole sea plants and seaweeds, where we realized a lot of the problems which we were grappling with, microalgae, the containment issues, the scalability issues, the sustainability problems, were all solved largely by these growing on the sea plants on the oceans. They're very efficient carbon capture mechanisms, and they can be converted into whether it's biopolymers or fuels or products for agriculture. So that's how the journey started when we found out that this is a really scalable and sustainable biomass. And the kind of products which we could make out of it had impacted multiple very, very relevant fields. So that's how we got started. And over the years, like I mentioned, it has been a blessing in disguise working in this particular series in this field, where we've been able to bring about products which really make a difference. For example, the agri products which we have launched can actually improve productivity by 10-15% on land, and help in that whole process of food productivity. So if the passion is, I think we have found something which can be really scalable and can address a lot of big problems that we are looking at today. So that's what keeps us driving every day and motivating us keeping forward on what we do.
And from our conversation, Soumya, as well, what you mentioned was the underlying driver being energy independence for India and better ways of energy consumption. So interesting to be alive, to playing to your potential, using biology to replace chemistry fundamentally in the way we manufacture, to energy independence, range of motivations to make the world a better place. Moving on, what's been your challenge and how have you overcome, right? So for the founders in the audience to get inspired in these long journeys, maybe you can just pick up one specific challenge and deep dive on that.
Should I go as role number one?
Sure.
Actually, I'll pick up from what Soumya mentioned, right? Like, I mean, I can't even imagine how the situation was 7 years ago or something. But when I started in 2018, honestly, like everybody was like, okay, so yeah, you're starting a non-profit. And till like mid of 2019, it was all like a non-profit. And I was like, no, there's a lot of potential, guys. This will be a multi-billion-dollar business in 2030 when everyone will have to buy our data to figure out like what's going to happen to the planet. It's like, you know how we had this term, which was Bloomberg for environmental data. And the entire financial industry runs on the Bloomberg terminal. Like everybody goes and like checks like all the stock prices and all of those information. And in 2020, 22, 23, 24, 25, you will have to come to us to understand how much is the water in the reservoir under your city. How much is the water in the lakes and the rivers, and how are the glaciers melting, and how is the electricity production going to change? And still, you know, we had all of this sort of potential. It was very clear in my mind that this is a unicorn opportunity. And we had people telling us that, yeah, so non-profit, right? You should go and raise grants. And I think, for climate tech folks, it's very depressing, the work that we do. We are like against a very, very, very big wall, and we are trying to attack that absolute impossible challenge. And then you have people who have no trust on being either able to solve the problem, who don't even believe this is a problem. And then you get like the whole like non-profit categorization, who do not trust on the technology solutions, business potential. So I think, for the founders, go for it. Go for it despite all of that, because I think we have come in 3 years, we have moved the needle. And now climate tech startup is a word. There is a panel happening on climate tech startups. 3 years ago, that was not heard of. And 3 years is not a lot of time. It just happened in a split second. So, I think just go for it, these things.
Yeah, and having had the opportunity to track your journey, Abhilasha, for 2 years, can relate to that very much. Ezil, over to you on what's been your major challenge and how have you overcome the same?
Whenever someone asks me this, always tell them how much time do I have? Because the laundry list.
A minute or maybe a minute and a half.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we always hear this, but I don't think the biggest challenge for deep tech investment, market relevant investment, sustainability, climate relevant investment in our ecosystem is still funding and investment itself. Right? I think the entrepreneurs speak Greek and the investors are speaking Malayalam. And we just are trying to speak past each other, speak together to build something. At some point, we have to realize and figure out how to do this. Solutions that require paradigm shifts, require patient capital, require risk taking. So, if you want to take a model that works for a tech platform for the $1 billion and apply it here, sometimes there will be a disconnect. And I have to say that that's been one of the biggest challenges, because the societal impact is extremely clear, the environmental impact is extremely clear, the technology forward, the innovation impact is extremely clear. But fundamentally, oftentimes what we are proposing doesn't fit the formula that an investor has. So I think that's been one of the biggest challenges, because that means if we want to stay within this ecosystem, we have to move slower than our counterparts in other ecosystems, which is a fundamental challenge. And we are working through it. Obviously, we worked our way through it, but I wish it was easier.
Already build a good segue to my next question on message to investors here, but we'll park the larger thoughts on that one for now. And Soumya, what's been your major challenge in the journey so far?
So if it's to all the founders starting up, I think when we started up, we started in a field where there was very little tech or advisors or anything. Everything had to be built from a scratch. So we keep saying, seaweed cultivation was almost equivalent to agriculture 10,000 years ago. It was so ancient. So we had to build each and every block of the tech. So finding people to even advise or consult. So right from developing basic things like a simple structure on the sea, which was non-existent. It all had to be done in-house. So coming up with concepts, right, making the prototypes, actually testing it out there. And today, over the last 10 years, what we have finally achieved is developing a very strong range of patents and technology which enables this technology. So for people who have these really new and crazy ideas, who are worried that there is nobody out there who's done this before, I don't have a model where I could, take some insights from to build my company. I think that is perfectly fine. If you feel that you have an idea which is powerful and you're really passionate about, putting together a good team, getting started on it, over a period of time, you would figure out those solutions. And once you have technology in place, everything else falls in place, whether it's investments or commercialization, everything comes right after you have your tech in place. So I would say focus on the team, focus on developing the technology, even if it's for the first time out there.
Great. Moving on to the next question, and Ezil set up the context well for that one. What are your message to a lot of investors in the audience? And I heard Ezil saying the Greek Malayalam issue. So that is already a good starting point. And Abhilash, over to you.
Oh, to me, I thought it'll go to Ezil. Actually, I'll give you guys a meme. So I don't know. I think most of the investors would have seen. Millennials know this. It's like for a short while, it's two guys in a stone age rubbing like some stones to generate fire, and it's like, yeah, for a short while we generated a lot of shareholder wealth. And that is my message. It's like, you are an investor. I know you have duties. I was an investor. I was working at a fund. I know all the calculations, all the Excel sheets, everything that you guys are trying to do. But if you're not alive, none of it matters, right? Like you don't eat your returns. My old boss actually always used to say this, that you don't eat IRR, Abhilasha. You don't eat it. You eat something else. So you have to always understand as an investor, as a GP, what is the purpose of your fund? Why are you doing? You get up every day and you go and do work. What is the final purpose? And I'm coming from America just now, 2 days back I landed. So I think if you look into the American ecosystem, it's a post-apocalyptic, post-climate capitalist nightmare in many places. Like the societal collapses that we have seen in many towns, the series of problems that America presents today, or even something like, I think, top 2 men have as much wealth as 45% of the entire population, top 2 billionaires. So if you look into some of those aspects, you have to understand as an investor and as somebody who's in capital markets, what are you doing this for? What do you want your society to be shaped as? And a large part of it is deploy your capital to shape your environment and society in the way that you want it to look like. And you will create a lot of value when you are in a very innovative field, and when you're creating something for people, for customers, for consumers, for people, something like Google, it's $1 trillion company today. And 30 years from, as Azel mentioned, it's that Malayali, the language, 30 years from now, like in 1990s, actually Business Insider wrote a article after Google raised 25 million from Sequoia, that how will this company ever make money? Because how will search engine make money? Like in 1988, somebody wanted to be like, oh yeah, you will go and Google and you will search like, I don't know, how much is it? What is the weather in whatever, like you Google everything, you use everything for Google, and it would be $1 trillion company. So you have to take some of these like really extreme bets today. One, if you want to be alive, also if you want to create like $1 trillion opportunity. I think in many cases, the Indian VC ecosystem or the startup ecosystem fails because we don't have that much imagination and courage. So yeah, my message to investors is go get imaginative and more courageous.
Yeah, be courageous, be more creative in your thinking, be more visionary in your thinking. Ezil?
I shared my thoughts already. One thing I will add to that is we have to make, we have to take those leaps of faith, right? And I think the leaps of faith has to come from, we feed off of each other, right? Entrepreneurs feed off of investors. So if investors push the ecosystem to take very safe bets, we won't have very exciting technology solutions. So I think it goes hand in hand. If you're a founder, don't look for small changes, right? Don't look for things that can make a significant positive impact in terms of how we are living. And I think that goes with the ecosystem around us being able to enable that. One of the key folks, one of the key drivers in the ecosystem is capital. And, the investors controlling the capital should be enablers for founders to take those big jumps. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, interesting to make those bolder returns, take bolder bets. Soumya?
I think quite a few points have been discussed, but just one more point might be is like, I think investors in this particular space have to understand that this is going to be a long lead time kind of investment because most of the investments today are looking at 3x, 5x, 10x returns in 3 years, 5 years. So the life of these funds are pretty short. Most of the times. So we'll have to be creating funds which have longer lifetimes, which can actually enable very new innovations and technologies to take place. So unlike an e-commerce startup where you just get started off at a digital front and then you reach the customers within a few months, this is a space where it might need a much more longer runway for the companies to come up. So I would say longer fund lives would be important to fuel this system.
Be more patient, have a longer investment horizon duration. And Soumya, maybe the next question I'll start with you so that you have more to share and not everything is already covered by Abhilasha and Ezil. So moving to the next question on saying message to the founders, and again, Ezil already kind of weaved it very well with the message to investors to say dream big, think bold. Soumya, over to you and then Abhilasha.
Message to founders, if there's one thing I would very, very strongly recommend is to choose your founders and your initial team very, very carefully. Everything starts from there. Everything can fall apart if you don't have the right team by your side. And if you have the right team, everything can be working out your way. So we were lucky to find the set of founders that we have at C6. And I can say, if not for the people, it's just impossible to go through an entrepreneurship journey with so much of ups and downs. Especially during the lows is when you need your team to stand by you and take you through those. And there's never going to be a journey where you're only going to have the highs. That's an impossible story. And I don't think I've seen anyone say that to me, or I would be surprised if somebody said that to me. So the only way to take over that is by your people and the team standing by yourself. So spend a lot of time in the beginning to get that right. So that would be a very, very key factor. But secondly, it's also alignment throughout the process. Getting the right investors also make a big difference, because if you're not aligned on the vision and what the outcome and what you want to really do, that becomes a challenge as well. So getting the right investors and at the right time. I've also seen a couple of startups, kind of pushing the fundraise to a later stage and not exactly doing it way before when you need it, because it's a time taking process. So start early, so that you don't die out before you actually go through the process and raise the funding. So yeah, this would be my two cents, if I might say it that way. The right team, get the money at the right time, would probably really help in building the companies moving forward.
Great. Tasha.
So within my friend circle, actually, I'm known as this person who's always nudging everybody. Like my brother is my co-founder, and he has this joke that I meet everybody and like, oh, startup, you should do a startup. If you don't have an idea, I'll give you 5. All climate tech, right? And the funny story is like I saw Soumya started, her company right after IIT. In 2010, my best friend, who's now a very senior, employee at Google. So we were discussing, and we discussed literally the sketch of Uber and Ola. We had like papers drawn, we had like whole discussions, we worked on it for like 2-3 months. We were students, we were still in 3rd year, and obviously we didn't jump into it. Otherwise, we would have been like multimillionaires or something. But even if we would have failed, and even if we wouldn't have been multimillionaires, as Ezel mentioned, do something which is worth failing. Even if we would have failed at it like miserably, it would have been a lifetime of an experience. We would have had a lot of fun doing it. And I think that's my big send for founders and everybody out there. Like, if you are not having fun, do things in which it's worthwhile failing, and have the right people obviously by your side. And I think if you are focused on some purpose, like focus on like larger problems, you will have a lot of fun doing it. So if you're a founder, like just figure out everything around you will give you ideas, everything around you. I look at like this problem, okay, another problem. Like I have 20 business ideas, call me, I'll share some of them. I have like no IP or any patent or thing. And then we can reshape our society as founders, as entrepreneurs. We have this superpower to imagine what we want our society to look like and make it happen. So let's do that. I always also say this thing that India is a 1.3 billion people. We also produce one of the highest number of like engineers and scientists, one of the highest like best education like mathematics and science, and we're only a $2.8 trillion economy, right? It's like that number doesn't match. Like how can you be so brilliant and how can our economy be so small, right? We have to create like $1 trillion technology businesses out of India. And that can only happen when every other kid is trying something random in their, backyard, in their houses, in their rooms. Something random. You're 19 years old, doesn't matter. Make some random app. You'll fail at it. You'll fail at 2 apps. Then you'll create something which is like multi-billion dollar, right? So I think that like experimental streak and like just going for some of those things without like doubting yourself so much. Like back in 2010, we were just filled with doubt. And even when we started in 2018, I think Soumya also Ezel also mentioned, it's also about ecosystem, how the ecosystem like enables you. And sometimes with Indian ecosystem, it pulls you down, it nags at you. It's like, will you be able to do it? Will you be able to do it? So, surround yourself by people who will instead say, no, you'll be able to do it. And if you don't have those people, all the 4 women on this panel will be those women for you.
Panels there for you. A strong message there. Ezel, I know you have a strong message here to founders. In addition, Ezel, I would request you, given you've spent 10 years in Silicon Valley, to add on your messages from what you see in the climate tech ecosystem globally versus in India, and hence some of the messages for the audience. Some of the insights you would like to draw for India as we shape this ecosystem as different players, right? As founders, as investors.
Sure. I think, one of the fundamental things that I would like to highlight is solutions for climate change cannot necessarily only be asset light. I feel like our ecosystem is really going towards asset light models. And at some point, we have to give in and say, if you have to manufacture, if you need battery innovation, if you need energy innovation, you have to invest in infrastructure. And I feel like the US is actually learning that lesson slowly because they skimped on infrastructure the last few years and now they are trying to ramp up. I think that's a lesson learned for Indian investors is, yes, the last 10 years we've gone asset light, but can that work for every kind of problem? I think that we need to open up and say, where you have to invest in infrastructure, you have to, because that's clearly a gap for our ecosystem. I'll just talk about our own space, right? If you look at synthetic biology, we are significantly backwards in terms of what you can do here compared to what you can do in the West, largely because we haven't taken those bold bets in investing in that infrastructure. And if we don't do that in the next 10 years, we're going to be left far behind, not just the US, but other ecosystems like, China, clearly, Israel, Singapore, and you don't want to play catch up after that. So I think that's the clear difference I see here is we tend to go try to fit things within a box, and I think sometimes you have to look outside of that and come up with better solutions that way. The one advantage we have for the Indian ecosystem is your innovation capital can go a longer way here compared to a Western ecosystem. So I think that's something that we have to really leverage and build on to come up with those most robust solutions, because that's a clear differentiator in the early stages of innovation development. So yeah, so I leave it at that for the investors. For founders itself, I think Soumya and Abhilasha both put it across very well. I think I know it's very often said this way, but it is about the journey and not the destination. And I think as you go through the journey, you realize you also evolve. And actually, in a lot of ways, that's a very gratifying part of doing this, because not only does your startup grow, but you evolve in more ways than one. So I think definitely jump into it, because it's a very, very fulfilling experience for founders also, even though there are a lot of lows. The highs make it worth it.
Well, lots of messages I'll summarize towards the end. But before that, another question, any specific challenges as women? And Abhilasha, I know you had good points to share here. So why don't you go ahead on this one?
Yeah, I'm sort of known as this feminist in my friend circle. But I think what I've seen around me, and I'm building it with my brother, and sometimes he says things which are actually quite a revelation for me. So we were in this one room with a lot of investors 2 years ago when we were still raising our angel round, right? And he was like, wow, bro, you were the only girl in the room. And I was like, yeah, that's the story of my life. He's like, man, but I was feeling really weird because he was the only person under the age of 25, 30 in the room. He was the only person. Everyone was 35 plus, and it was me, and it was him. And he was like, I was feeling so weird. How do you feel? Now I don't realize it. Now I don't register it. But yeah, it's not a very pleasant thing, being the only girl in the room of 50, 60, 20 men. It's really not pleasant. And now I sometimes point it to my friends, how are you? Kind of, you have subconscious biases, the words that you use, especially when you're building with your brother, you're living with him, you realize some of these subconscious biases, the words that men use all the time, that you don't even register sometimes. You're like, wow, that was mean. And I think that is something that, as a girl, you do get very discounted. I use this phrase often that girls have substance, which is very high, the knowledge, the experience, we work very hard. I would say compared to any other male founder, I or most of the female founders I know, we work really hard. We're very persistent. So we have all these qualities, and then we get discounted off. And probably that is because maybe you're not that confident, maybe we're too passionate. That's another word which is often served as a backhanded compliment. You're too passionate. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? You get as a girl, you get so many backhanded compliments, almost disguised as nags. And this is a large part is that we haven't spent time understanding the opposite gender at all. We especially a lot of VCs, I think, have subconscious biases. I'm not saying that they're bad men. I'm not saying that they have they mean this, but they have great subconscious biases where they are able to trust a man as a CEO much more than a girl. And usually even this word, we are usually referred to, even I'm 31 years old now, and I'm usually referred as a girl. Like, how am I still a girl? How is my other friend a man and I'm still a girl, right? So you usually get some of these like small biases. And as the VCs become more open, instead of if sometimes when we use the word like, hey, you're sexist, people become very defensive. I think if people become more open to the fact that they might have some of these subconscious biases and they might not understand when a female founder presents themselves, they have the same expectation, same vocabulary as a male founder. And that's just not going to happen. They're different people. Right. So I think that's a very large part of just understanding women and understanding girls as a different gender. We present in a different way. Our leadership style is different. Our pitching style is different. Sometimes you're not as confident, right? Sometimes you're not as sure. And you will think of it as that we are not sure, but we are sure. It's just like, we are different people.
Yeah, and if I may add one point on the subconscious bias and understanding the other gender. So one thing that stayed with me in a recent investment discussion where the co-investor was saying, hey, the founder is not aggressive. And this was a women founder. And I was like, hey, look at the aggressiveness in action and not just in projection. And that kind of rang a bell, right? So, yeah. In the spirit of time, I think very interesting conversation and insights. Just summarizing and then opening up for any questions that the audience may have. So I guess, the motivation is to be alive and to play to our potential. There are a lot of potential we have to use biology and make our country a more long-term viable, energy independent country. The challenge, I think, for investors, founders is speaking the same language and thinking for investors as well to think more courageous, be more bold, be more imaginative in the thinking, and similarly for founders to dream big, to choose your co-founders wisely. Think outside the box. Don't just think asset light, like don't just box the thinking, but I think be more one-on-one problem solvers. So lots of insightful points and takeaways. I hope everybody here enjoyed the conversation as well. Aman, let us know if there are any questions, and over to you. Meanwhile, if any of the panelists wants to make any closing remarks, feel free while we wait for any questions that may come up.
I think it's just great being part of the panel, which is focusing on climate change. So I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I think it's been a fantastic 1 hour on this, understanding various possibilities. So yeah, I'm looking forward to more such conversations in the space particularly, and a lot of companies coming up as well.
Yeah, ditto that. Thanks for a great moderation, Jayashree. It was a fun discussion. A nice way to spend Friday evening, actually.
Is it Friday already? Yeah. Yeah. Actually, this was one of the most brilliant panels that I've been on. Like, great to meet Ezil and Soumya. And I hope, I was before we started, we were already doing some business conversations. So I hope to do some business collaborations with both of them. Yeah, it's very motivating to see you guys. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you all for the opportunity to moderate this terrific panel as well. Aman, over to you, and the impact in India. The India Impact Investors Council for putting out such a terrific event. And over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayashree, for handing over. What an exciting discussion we just had. It was definitely a pleasure to hear the motivations, the challenges, and witness that passion for your enterprises. This was surely the right panel for us to end our climate conclave. Once again, I thank you all the panelists and moderator for joining us. Now, we are almost at the end of our conclave today, and to share his vote of thanks and few words to officially end the India Climate Investment Conclave 2021, I invite on screen our CEO, Ramraj Pai. Over to you, Ramraj.
Muted. Okay. Thank you, Aman, for the excellent coordination of the event. I must say that this has been a fascinating 2 days of discussion. We've had more than 250 plus unique attendees, 65 unique speakers from over 12 countries. And we had also more than 50 people attending our masterclass today morning. I think our report on the climate tech investing sector in India was also launched. And I think it's garnering quite a bit of interest, judging by the number of downloads that we've seen both from our resource center as well as our social media posts. I think while we'll be doing a detailed post-event proceedings report, I think three things stand out quite centrally. One is that climate tech investing is clearly emerging as one of the exciting new areas in the impact investing space. We are seeing increasing levels of interest from a wider variety of investors, foundations, entrepreneurs, and we're seeing a lot more participation from a variety of players. India is proving to be a great new emerging hub for climate tech investing. I think several of the panelists spoke about this exciting new opportunity coming out of the country. Notwithstanding all this exciting potential, there is a strong need for larger amounts of patient capital in the form of equity, debt, or grants that need to be activated to ensure that the sector gets the support that it needs. It has indeed been a great pleasure from all of us here at the IIC team to have brought this event together for all of you. This is but the first of a series of events that IIC will bring to you in the climate tech investing space. So you should watch this space for more. Our thanks to Omidyar Network India as well as Rabo Foundation for their direct support for our event. Thanks also go out to all our other partners, including Climate Collective Foundation, Retail Advisors who worked with us on our report, Climate Collective who worked with us very centrally on the event too, as well as our outreach and network partners, IBCA, Invest India, India Angel Network, Go Massive, Andy, Clean, Thai Chennai, Thai Delhi, as well as our two media partners, IDR, as well as Impact Alpha for their support. I'd also like to thank Rabo Foundation for their support, definitely for this event, and Omidyar as we spoke about. But last but not the least, I think to the entire team here at IIC, all of you are on screen, and I presume most of the people in the audience can see all of you here. So I think everyone has played the different parts of the role here. Kalpesh, Shriya and Dipanshi have all been very central to the release of the report. Ranjana, Neha have been very, very central in helping us organize, managing relationships, networking with the speakers, and a whole host of other things that most people would never even know that those things were done. I think Vedant, Kashish, and several others, Shriya, many of you on the panels. And the bulwark or the Hercules of the entire event has been Mr. Kalsi, Aman Kalsi, who's been the sort of, if I may say, the atlas, the bodybuilder on whose shoulders we are all standing and conducting this event. But I must also recognize the efforts of our platform partners. For some strange reason, both Saurabh and Lavina's cameras are not on. If you guys can put on your cameras, if that's possible. Thank you so much, Saurabh and Lavina and the rest of the Frames team. I think this has been a wonderful opportunity for us. So thank you once again to all the members of the IIC team for your wonderful effort. To the Frames team, I think this has been a great conversation. Lots of great participation from the audience. We are hoping to replicate multiple such events over the next few weeks and months. That's pretty much what I had to say. Thank you, everyone. Good evening and good night, and hope to see you around on yet another IIC event soon enough. Thanks, everyone. Thanks a lot, and good night, and good day, and goodbye.